let me welcome Mr. John Griffing.
Well, first let me say this mic is too short and I'm too tall. It's an honor to be here today. No, I was kidding. It's fine. It's an honor to be here today with you folks. This is an issue of grave concern to not only Texans, but many Americans who are watching from other states to see what is done in Texas and how we handle this situation. If Texas, let's see if I can make this workable here. If Texas does not address this, then we will be the first among many states who will have comparable situations on their hands. Texas is now being used as a testing ground by the radical left, education activists, people who have been really doing this type of thing in our schools for years. This philosophy, this conflict of philosophy is not new. Parents and teachers have resisted for decades what is now occurring in Texas public schools. But the danger of CScope is that as Texans, we have decided that something like this could never happen here. That's a phrase that many Texans I've found in flyover country, small towns, church on every corner, they utter this phrase, that could never happen here. Well, before 2008, we thought Obama could never happen. Lots of things that could never happen have been happening with ever-increasing frequency all around us. And CScope is no different. And folks, here's why it's so dangerous. It's not just one or two lessons. It's not as important as it is. We've got Ginger Russell here today who started all this trouble about a year ago when she found some lessons that were unabashedly pro-Islamic and crossed the line of impartiality in a review of a faith. And because of Ginger's early work, this issue got, I would say, the attention it deserved. But it's not just Islam, it's not just a few controversial lessons. We're talking about an approach to education that removes the teacher as the central force in the classroom and makes students teachers. Students are there to be taught. They're not there to teach themselves. How can they? That turns the entire Western model of education upside down. Some would say that's the intent. But student-directed teaching is now the model we're pursuing in 80% of Texas classrooms. So what's the ultimate end game? Before I get into some minutia and some facts, let me just go ahead and tell you what the end game is here. The end game is to make Texas a testing ground. If this type of thing can be done in Texas public schools, it can be done anywhere. Texas is the last thin blue line against the agenda that is now penetrating most of these 50 states. Unlike the president and Maxine Waters, I can count. What happens if we lose in Texas? It's a boundary crossed. Will we stop fighting? No. But the front will have been moved further into enemy territory. That's us. We're the enemy. Parents, people with traditional families, people who believe that it's okay to earn money and pursue wealth and keep what you earn. These people are targeted. And this is the boundary that is now being crossed with new voters. The people in 2008, the people in 2012 that pushed President Obama across the finish line, they weren't you or me. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm part of the problem, I suppose. But they were 18-year-olds. They were people fresh out of high school who had not been given the civic tools, the comprehension, the understanding of our legal system, of our Constitution, of our foundational principles that should feed into a voter's decision-making process. None of these people, none of these kids had that background like many of the faces in this audience probably had growing up and being educated in Texas. In other states, we've abandoned something that makes voters able to participate on an educated basis. And that's arguably the intent. With that, let me go ahead and go into some discussion here. How did this happen? How did CScope make it into 80% of Texas schools? This is a deficient product. It was adopted before it was even finished. There were no lessons when CScope was purchased initially by many schools. Shocking to most folks. Who would buy an unfinished product? Moreover, who would pay for that product 3 separate times and then lease it and still not fully own it? As shocking as that may be to some of you, that is exactly what happens every year with CScope. The school board has to pay to renew, to lease this product. But then the TESCCC has to pay for the right to sell it with state dollars. And there are all kinds of other hidden fees. But ultimately, we are paying for a product that's deficient. Not even just controversial, deficient, as you'll see, multiple times. Would you pay for a textbook as a taxpayer 3 times in a row if it had errors in it? Or at all, for that matter? Who would pay for something? I digress. Okay, so how did it happen? Well, administrators, many of whom have not spent that much time in classrooms, there are exceptions, saw a means of dotting their I's and crossing their T's. The new TEKS, the new rigorous standards, scared a lot of school districts. They thought, how can we keep up? How can we make sure we're meeting our AYP? Perfect opportunity for this third-party, nonprofit corporate entity to swoop in with the solution. CScope. That's why you're hearing a lot of reaction now from administrators who are desperate that no one sees their significant error. Because, folks, the purchase of CScope by 80% of Texas public school districts is probably going to go down as the biggest error, too small a word, in the Texas educational system's history. And I say that because we are putting something in classrooms that doesn't achieve the 3 R's. Kids are no longer learning reading and writing. There's no phonics. CScope's admitted to this. There's no phonics. We're teaching whole language. That worked so well for the baby busters coming up in the 70s. They tried it on them too. And we're doing new math, or no math in some cases. So many holes have been found in the math curriculum. It's laughable. English, so many holes. History, social studies is what's gotten the most focus, and rightly so. We're not even teaching American history. We're teaching something completely different. But the I dotting and T crossing is why administrators saw some appeal. Interestingly, though, and I think Trish Hanks sent an email out today, statement on behalf of FISD saying that we need this because we need it because we have to meet the TEKS. And the social studies lessons, those are anathema. That's not really relevant because we're not going to use them. We understand it's controversial, etc., etc. But the other lessons are fine. Number one, schools are not meeting state standards with CScope. The data is in. Read my new article as of today. The data is in. Schools that are using CScope have a higher failure rate, students scoring unacceptable on their assessments, than non-CScope schools. It's a farce. It's a crock. It's snake oil. And yet administrators are defending it to the hilt. Why? It failed. Admit it. Move on. No harm in it, right? Well, you have to ask yourself the question, if something is just a harmless management tool for teachers to make it easier to deliver content, why the big guns? Why all the lawyering? Why all the personal attacks on average citizens and parents who just want to know what their kids are looking at in classrooms? And furthermore, why in the hell is that controversial? Why do parents have to beg to see something as simple as a lesson plan? That's what we're talking about here. All the smoke and mirrors, all the, we need it because it helps us stay with the sequencing and the stuff. Teachers aligned curriculum years before CScope. I've spoken with teachers who have been around for 38 plus years. Folks, the idea that we need CScope to align curriculum, or that we need CScope, because it's the only scope and sequence available to teachers, is pure hogwash. It's marketing. You've got producers of a product using your money, by the way, to fund it, who don't want to lose their paycheck. It's that simple. So instead of wasting time getting pulled into these little tit-for-tat discussions, we need to be engaging as community actors, as parents, as educators. There are so many educators who have risked their pensions, in many cases, to step out in districts where they have been threatened. I can't speak for every district, but we've gotten reports in from a number of teachers in multiple districts dispersed across Texas that claim that they've been threatened with termination for simply talking about some of CScope's content. Not even just social studies or history, English. We have an abundance of lessons, I think, that are circulating around the room. A lot of people have brought their own materials. We have Ginger Russell, who's brought, I think, a whole file cabinet. So feel free to peruse what's available here. But what am I saying? Ultimately, I'm saying if something quacks like a duck, it's usually, more often than not, a duck. We had Dan Patrick. I spoke with him this morning. He was very interested in the new data that I had reported, and he had reported only a month or so before that Texas had seen its unacceptable schools rate jump from about 100 to over 500 since CScope was introduced. And we've confirmed that CScope is a factor in that increase. So the big thing is, what's CScope's response? Well, like anybody with a good legal team, they have one. It'll get worse before it gets better. Well, we already have schools that are doing better. Why don't we just emulate those schools? To me, this isn't about some arch conspiracy of Freemasons who are trying to penetrate schools with communist agendas, although there are agendas moving through CScope. Don't get me wrong, I'll address that too. This is about common sense. If something isn't working, and it's filled with toxic literature, and students, excuse me, this podium doesn't really hold things well, and students aren't getting their basics, their foundation to function in society as citizens, as thinking citizens, not multiple choice, not, circle the right contextual answer, thinkers, people who can reason, then we really shouldn't be using this product, should we? I mean, am I alone?
No, you're not. You're not alone.
Okay, so CScope. Let's hit some of the biggies here, because I know you're all wanting to hear Islam and communism. And so here, let's hit some of the big things that are wrong with this. Number one, CScope is designed to produce incompetent, unskilled servants of the state. I don't know how anybody could conclude anything else. I don't know how people who aren't able to pass tests with this thing, or who are honor students who come home and go, Mom, Dad, the teacher's wrong. How is that supposed to create good citizens? Number two, parents are not given access to CScope. Students do not bring home textbooks, and parents are therefore not able to, as a general rule, review what is actually being taught every day in a fail-safe manner. Trusting educators is not the glue that makes the American system work, but rather accountability. Not mistrust, but accountability. Reagan said, trust but verify. And several hundred years before him, Thomas Jefferson said, quote, confidence is everywhere the parent of despotism. Let no more be heard of confidence in man, but bind him down with the chains of the Constitution. I agree wholeheartedly. And then we've got the issue of CScope as a nonprofit. Now, admittedly, CScope is supposedly taking steps to rectify this, and the lack of access to parents, and the lack of access to others, and the fact that teachers are held legally liable if they share content outside of the classroom. CScope is supposedly taking steps to address this, as of several months ago, effective immediately. Nothing has changed. In a word, nothing. CScope has taken no visible action to correct these issues. We still don't have access. Parents, grandparents still do not have access, and we're told it's a process. It's a work in progress. We're updating the website. Did you know that teachers have told me that of all the errors they've found in lessons when they submitted them to technical support, not one of them over these last 8 years has ever been corrected? So why should parents expect any different treatment? Folks, when someone says it's a work in progress and they're dealing with an internet-based platform, you know they're lying to you. The internet, a private web-based platform, a truly private web-based platform, could fix this in a couple weeks. Why is it so difficult for CScope and the TESCCC, its parent company, to make a couple simple changes? Well, I would say that pretty much answers itself. Parents still do not have direct access. The user agreements teachers sign, which have been compared to iTunes user agreements by Thomas Ratliff and even CScope, jokingly, of course. Oh, it's no different than iTunes. I kind of wonder what's in those things, too, sometimes. Yeah, but in any case, teachers are exposed to legal liability per the verbiage used in these agreements. And what CScope has not told you is that while they've changed the wording, the new user agreements are only accessible to teachers at schools that will sign on to CScope. Existing users, that's teachers, folks, at CScope schools do not get to sign the new user agreement and are still exposed. So nothing's changed. And that's why, as of today, I am so excited to hear that the Attorney General has decided to do some heavy-duty investigation with the threat of shutting this whole thing down if they find a single illegal item. Thank you, Greg Abbott. I don't care about his reasons for doing it. I'm just thankful he is. We deserve good public servants like that, and I'm glad we still have a few. Now, a lot of you have been probably following Senator Dan Patrick's oversight legislation. He co-wrote a bill with Donna Campbell, much appreciated. Dan has been on this like white on rice from the very beginning. And this bill is a good bill. But I've got to tell you, it'd be better if we could just defund the thing. And here's why. Like I said, it doesn't work. Why do we want to legitimize a product that doesn't work with oversight? Can you fix something that's broken, or should you try, or just buy something new? I would not be trying to fix something that, as Dan Patrick referred to it, is a mess. I would just sweep the mess under the rug and move on. So state oversight's not the silver bullet that a lot of us have accepted it as. We as Republicans, tend to get really excited about something that allows us to retreat and go back to normal everyday life as we've known it. We can't keep doing that because local school boards approve CScope. Your community, this is where it's at. All politics is local. Many of you have probably heard this expression. In the case of education, that's more true than in any other domain. Your kids, the people they will become, the way they will behave and interact with society all starts in K through 12 education. Habits are very hard to change, especially those that are ingrained in the recesses of someone's mind. And when they are habitually taught, they meaning students, to think that they deserve something just because they're here, or to think that everything that feels good is a right, but have no knowledge of how to participate in this system or how the system is supposed to function, how can you expect the system to endure? It's more important than ever that school boards be our focus. Whatever happens above our head that helps, we should be thankful, but we can't stop engaging locally. So local solutions at the local level are what will rid Texas of CScope and anything like it. Okay, so we've gotten to the point where a lot of you are probably wondering, okay, what can I do? This is really bad. What can I do? I'm just a mom. I'm just a dad. You're just someone with rights under Texas Education Code, Chapter 26, to see any and all instructional materials used by your students. That's a pretty big thing. I would encourage each and every one of you here today, if you have not already, and I know these folks have, Engage teachers, engage the district, and demand, not ask, not request, not tiptoe around, demand per your rights under Texas Education Code, Chapter 26, to see all content for each class that is being used within that school year. If they can't produce it, if they delay in producing it, you might want to consider the next step. We all have to think this way at this point. And it's not your fault, and it's not my fault, it's not our fault. Districts have signed on to this, and now they're covering. And that's created this dynamic. Embrace it, deal with it, let's get this done. Okay, so that being said, parents are the most powerful force in schools. Why hasn't more been done? It's very simple. And please, no one get offended, but this is something that I've observed as a conservative, not as a journalist, but as a conservative over the last decade. Conservatives get issue fatigue. We're slaves to the 24-hour news cycle. We get a little angry about something, or outraged in some cases, and we do a little bit, and we think, okay, we've won a small victory, we can relax for a while, we can rest, except we never get back up again. We put up a mission accomplished banner, no insult meant to President Bush, and we retreat. Well, the radical left gets up again. In fact, they never sit down. They wake up every day with the intent and design behind it of fundamentally transforming America. In order to have lives and families and hobbies as excuses, it is imperative that we match the energy of the left right here, right now, and do what needs to be done to rout the takeover of our classrooms. We may never get another chance. When foreign terrorists are given domestic trials, the effective murder of an entire embassy is ignored. Saudis are given trusted traveler status, and impeachment is still a non-starter. We have a problem. Our kids were taught in Lumberton that terrorists should now be called freedom fighters. I won't get into the semantics. It's a complex situation. It's been addressed. And we wonder why there is so little outrage in the media about the things that happen every week in the Oval Office. That's our fault. We don't have the energy. We have jobs. We have cell phones. It's like mine that went off. We have excuses, and they're all very good ones. We're the reason this country is what it is, because we have families, because we have jobs, because we're the taxpayers. And the left has used that, folks. The left has used our motivation to continue to do what makes this country great against us, to divert our energy, and they keep pushing the envelope, and we have to start pushing back. Ending CScope starts with each one of us in this room calling our legislators. Thank God we have a congressman here today. Thank you, sir, for attending. Men like that make accountability possible. If our congressman didn't listen, if our legislators in Texas at the state level did not listen, then something like this would be impossible to address. But folks, even yelling in your congressman's ear for a few minutes on the phone is not going to cut it anymore. Has it really gotten CScope that nervous? No. I watched as the executive officers of CScope said in a Senate hearing being effectively attacked by Senator Patrick in every valid way possible. Sit coolly, calmly, collected, take it, and then go right back to work. They don't care, but we really need to start caring more. So what are we going to do? That's up to us. Thank you for your time. I'll now take some questions with the permission of Deborah. Oh, good.
We're writing them. Write it down. Sure.
And I would just like to introduce Miss Paula, who has furnished us with lovely trees on both credentas.
Please feel free to take them as you leave.
Would you please stand up? Yes,
Everything you want, eat.
Now, Deborah, if you would pass the trays around the front table. But she has graciously brought us all this wonderful food, and she's actually furnished food for a lot of candidate receptions
law. So, and also for Dr. Greg Bonnet, if you would like to have any parties or anything like this is how it's set up, or I'll set it up bigger, please let me know.
And I also wanted to introduce candidate for Friendswood City Council, Carl Gustafson, in that room over there.
Okay.
I got the news.
Good to see you, Carl.
Thank you for coming, sir.
Okay.
Carl, come stand in the frame.
All right.
All right. He's running for city council, thank goodness.
Thank you.
Okay.
Folks, I think we're going to start off with a couple big questions here. We have a comment from someone in the audience who says they were told by administrators to lower their expectations. Why is that? Well, it's very obvious, because then you won't be too upset when you realize that CScope didn't work and that your kids are failing. And that's the case in many school districts all over the state right now. It's similar to what I addressed at the beginning, where CScope is now saying, well, hey, it's got to get worse before it gets better. The kids are supposed to fail at first. I don't want my kids failing. If my kid's doing a good job according to Texas state standards, I don't want the system to hold them back. I don't want a program like CScope checking off a list at the expense of my child's performance. There's my answer to that. Okay. Was this a need for a curriculum recognized and put out for, is that for bids? Yeah, okay. Good question. How did the school and state employees have the time to develop and redevelop this? Was it ever shipped? Okay, folks. I have some stuff coming out hopefully soon. I'm still confirming sources. I don't ever release anything I can't support. Let's suffice it to say that CScope was not written by teachers for teachers. Barbara Cargill was just sent a list of names. Supposedly the writers, handful of people, could not have written 1,600 lessons, but suffice to say she got some names. No titles, no locations, no affiliations. Like everything else with CScope, they do what buys them time. And this has not bought them much time. I will say that everything about the way this was structured and set up is legally questionable. I'm going to leave myself some wiggle room there. They use state dollars to create a private nonprofit, which even Senator Patrick himself has said was set up without the required approval of the state legislature. We still don't have any financial records showing how much CScope brings in and how much goes out on CScope. All state dollars. We do not have these records as of right now. A senator had to file an audit to get the records of a public agency, folks. What are we doing? Okay, so that, I think, addresses that issue. As far as where the lessons come from, I can't say yet, but hopefully soon. Okay, do you see CScope affecting homeschoolers? Yes. Look at what's happening in Europe right now. We are legally criminalizing homeschooling. Why? Because the agenda doesn't reach homeschoolers. We always knew that at some point as parents, if we were trying to protect our children via homeschooling, we would eventually have to make a very tough decision. Thankfully, Supreme Court precedent in the United States protects homeschoolers. So if anyone ever is challenged, and I think there were a couple challenges in California, we have a legal precedent on our side. That doesn't always stop judges, but it stops them most of the time. All right, let's see. Oh, someone asked about SB 6. Who was that? Was that you, sir? What was the crux of your question?
That was a loophole that they used to get in without being examined.
Correct.
And I understand now there's legislation in progress. We've got a congressman here. Maybe he knows what it is to do away with legislation number 6.
Well, that's a Texas state level legislative issue, and arguably those who favored that bill, and the loophole was not, I doubt there was some sort of malicious intent, in other words, on the part of Texas legislators to cause this. It's hindsight. Hindsight is 2020. We are now repairing that loophole, and I think it's the same bill that Patrick has co-authored with Campbell think that's comprehensive. So,
Does the state school board approve CScope? Is it sanctioned?
well, if you've been reading my articles, no. Can I address that? I'll repeat the question. State Board of Education, I was just asked if the state board approves and reviews CScope. No, never has, and only now have we seen an ad hoc voluntary panel established to do just that. But the compliance aspect at this point will be non-existent. It won't be until we get something concrete on the books that the State Board of Education will have the same powers it has over textbooks. Right now, CScope can't be fined if there are errors. If it could, it wouldn't be able to financially exist because there are so many errors. But the State Board is acquiring that authority, and very soon we should see something more official in place. Do I have any more? You want to go ahead? Okay. I've just been given the red light. Do we have time for one more question? Clay.
Has anybody bothered to compare the actual CScope teak to the actual teak that's published? Because my opinion is, from the time I spent on the computers, I kind of like to think I have like a photographic memory, and I'm not sure, but I feel like there's discrepancies between the actual teak that's in there and the actual teak that's printed. I'd like to see somebody who's a lot smarter than me take a look at that.
Well, teachers are pretty smart. We've got great teachers in the state of Texas. I wish they were empowered to do what they do best and allowed to teach. So I'll defer to teachers on that one. Every teacher I've spoken with who's unafraid, who's willing to come forward, has said that the teaks are not taught by CScope. They're listed, and they're into the teaks. I think I'm going to go ahead and turn things back over to Kathy. Can I take one more?
Yeah, well, you didn't answer my question about data mining.
Data mining. Find that for me.
Okay, is it pink? Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, what about CScope's data mining? What about guns, religion, etc.? Could you clarify the data mining point a bit?
Okay, what CScope does is it asks children to write essays about guns in their home, what their religious values are, what their parents' political beliefs are, and it collects that information and it sends it back up to the mothership.
Okay. This is a Common Core feature too. Anybody's heard of Common Core? That's the new federal national standards initiative out of the Department of Education. They're doing the same thing with CScope. In other words, they couldn't get Common Core, but CScope's being very cooperative. And we are collecting anything and everything on children all the way up through high schoolers, and creating dossiers, digital dossiers on these students.
John, one more question about that.
Yes.
I've asked if they are actually uploading this into the government, and I've been told no, but I have no way of proving it. My son tells me that every time they do these lessons, the teacher spends time entering data into the computer, the grades or whatever is what he's referring to. Now, I'd like to find out somebody who could go in there and find out if this is actually going up to the mothership, or if we managed to loosey-goosey CScope here and it's not happening yet. I want to know if the mothership's got any information about me.
Well, you can always do a Freedom of Information Act request. You have to be skilled at that. As Ginger well knows, she's done, I think, about an average of 1 or 2 of those a day. But that's not the best. That's not going to get us very far, because as you pointed out, the response is no. If the people that have abused our trust to begin with are the ones we're asking, then we're not going to get very far. So I would start with a Freedom of Information Act request. Can I field one more question? Okay, we're done?
I just wanted you to highlight the Marxist philosophy behind it all.
Okay, so
Just the
how does the Marx...
even
Okay,
if you take the
sure,
lessons out, the
sure.
philosophy.
Well, let me just go ahead and tell you, we've got 3rd grade lessons that teach that equality in the American context is fair share. Who does that sound like? I've got to think. Well, him too, but yes, thank you, Barack Obama. Why is Barack Obama talking point from his campaign being taught as the fundamental definition of American equality in a third grade classroom. It's a good example. Then we had the famous stairs to communism chart that I published in WorldNet Daily. You can see the copyright information. I would have laughed if it weren't actually a real diagram used in Texas classrooms. It seems outrageous that anything comparable could ever make it past the watchdogs we have, our crack watchdogs at the TEA. But that's the problem. There's no oversight. So here's what it does. And you can look this up online. No number of places have reposted. But all it is it shows capitalism at the bottom, and it defines capitalism in the most base and negative way. It defines communism at the very top. And you see a man climbing stairs as if to suggest that when we attain communism, we've reached the top of the stairs. Communism is defined in the most equanimous way possible. So I think I've addressed that issue. Yeah.
How is communist defined?
Okay, well, communism, and I've got anybody who reads my content online, I've actually featured multiple lessons that include definitions, but there's one, that same chart. If you look at that chart, I didn't bring it with me, maybe Ginger or someone else has a copy. If you look at that chart, it defines communism. There's also a political continuum that defines Democrats and Republicans. Okay, now the person who did this continuum clearly is bad at grammar because I had to do SIC a couple times. I think we have a journalist there. I think he knows what I'm talking about. But basically, it says Democrats are for the individual. They're for they're for the betterment of the individual, and Republicans are for big business. Gosh, I feel like I'm reading a Ted Turner piece or something. But that's what amounts to education these days in Texas, and I hope that with current efforts on the part of the Attorney General and Senator Patrick and Campbell, we can fix that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. On behalf of the club, we'd like to give you a free copy of the Cal Thomas book that we were selling at the headquarters.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your time. Again, John Griffing.
If you don't